seminar in cracking IT job. Uh, in this particular section, we are going to discuss how to select proper industry verticals because ultimately that will have a big consequence in your career, and sometimes people make a big mistake in choosing the right kind of industry vertical, and that usually will have a lot of bearing on consequences on their career growth in IT industry. So let me get into the screen. So John, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically, growing in an industrial career or in any software career is just like investing into stock. So when you invest in a stock market, you look into which industry is going faster, which kind of technology is having much more runway. And it's exactly in the same way when you'll be selecting your company, when you'll be selecting your software stack or anything, it pretty much resembles the same idea of where you want to be in terms of future so that you grow faster. Now, for any software engineer, most of you will be joining as a trainee computer operator, then you'll be graduated as a developer or a programmer. From there, you will rise as a project manager or a team leader. After that, you can be promoted as a delivery manager or a program manager, then you'll be an architect, IT leaders, and then some of you will be in position of chief information officers. Now you have to understand that this is a pyramid structure, which means that if any industry needs 1 million programmer, they certainly don't need 1 million chief information officer. There might be, the same industry might be having only a couple of hundred of them. So only one in 10,000 of you, only one in 10,000 of you will be able to grow into a career of chief information officers. Then rest of you probably will be somewhere along line the career. And that's why it's very important to understand which industry you are going to select, where you will be able to rise more smoothly into top career as a leader to the chief information officer, as well as your growth will be much more sustainable and better. In fact, in the last podcast, we discussed what will determine your salary to some extent, based on your individual coding skill and technical skills. In this particular podcast, I'm going to discuss how selection of industry vertical and technology is going to make a difference in your career. So let's start with a practical example. Now, here I'm showing you the breakdown of IT spend by industry. And it's an interesting breakdown I'm showing you. On the left hand side, you are seeing on-prem software spend. In the middle, you can see that green is on SaaS, software as a service spend, and then the blue is infrastructure and platform cloud, and then there is the rest of all kind of app and infrastructure and stuff like that. So I want to focus on the left-hand side blue one, which is around about 25% of the IT industry. And chances are that if you're joining Infosys, TCS, or Cognizant or IBM, no matter which large IT major, one in four probably will land up onto the blue area. What is that? These are called desktop software, or sometimes it called on-premise software. Like this used to be our first generation of software that people used to run on-premise. It can be Oracle HR, Oracle CRM, can be old kind of CRM or other kind of software, can be even SaaS, or can be even a kind of a SAP. And most of the job are going to be tech support or maintenance. And I'm telling you, are nearly 25, some people say probably 30-40% of the job that you're going to do in Infosys and TCS. So the very basic question to ask, if that kind of job is offered to you, will it be good for you to accept that offer from TCS or no matter which big company it is. How do you know? How do you determine that whether you're going to accept that job? Of course, if you don't have other option, you will. But I'll show you some different realities here. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the statistics I'm showing you based on a Flexera 2020 report, based on the trend of the tech spending. And if you look at it, this on-premise software, every CIOs in the industries are saying, be it a healthcare, retail, industrial. I mean, if you take any kind of industry vertical, no matter which vertical you are in, the spending on that is going to be decreased. Instead, what will happen is most of them are going to be moving to cloud-based and software as a service-based system, which are more modern, that takes less maintenance and stuff like that. So the people who will be joining in this kind of on-premise software support, as I said, you have to be very careful because it's going to be 25% to 40% of the job that is, whenever you are going to join in Infosys TCS. Even if I go by the statistics today, in a matter of 5 to 7 years, their salary, probably starting salary is going to be 3.5 lakhs. And after significant years, maybe after 10 years, their salary will not rise even beyond 8 to 9 lakhs. And that's probably max because that segment is not growing. In fact, that segment is shrinking. There's a leftover job which has no future, and maybe in another 10 years there'll be no on-premise software at all. I mean, and then those people will be in a career problem because typically then you will not have any kind of coding skill and you'll not have any kind of other skill to migrate into. So that's disaster, and this is already happening. I mean, if you look at the mid-career level software people, those who started their career in on-premise software, most of them are nowhere today. So the point is then how do you select the right kind of stack that will give you a long career pathway? Now, if you look at it here in SaaS spend, software as a service. So what is software as a service? I mean, you all have heard this name. So these are the monthly build and mostly cloud-based system. I mean, Salesforce is a good example, even Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics 365, even SAP as a SaaS-based system. In all of that, typically, if you're a part of that industry, now if you're a part of SaaS industry, the kind of job that you will be doing is mostly as an analyst or as an expert on how to implement those SaaS. So those are good things because you'll know that industry vertical very well. In that case, your concern will be to know which industry vertical you are in. Are you in transportation or e-commerce or financial or industrial? So that will be the thing that you'll be looking into. But at least you know that technology stack will be safe. You are in a right place. Because as I said, in on-premise software, it will be mostly a desktop support, and those desktop support are going away. Here, at least you know the skills that you are acquiring in a SaaS might be as a programmer, might be as an implementation specialist or a vertical specialist in any of the vertical. That skill is good. That is going to stay because you'll evolve with it. So that's something worthwhile. In this case, probably your salary and growth will depend on the growth of the industries. You have to look into whether financial service ITs are going to grow versus retail IT is going to grow. But you are safe. At least you are not going to be out of the market. Maybe your growth will be different if you're in a fintech versus retail versus healthcare and stuff like that. So I'll come back to that part of the vertical in detail. But today let's focus on the fact that if you're given a job in a desktop software support, well, you'll accept the job if you don't have any other job. But I'll tell you to get out and get into a developer's job, even if that pays less, even if that is from a very small startup, you will have a way much faster career growth than being in TCS or Infosys and in a desktop support job. So that's the bottom line because I've seen many people have done the mistake. And what will happen, I get their point of view. I know that most of the students hated their education system, hated being in a school, hated being in a college, hated their teachers, hated the books, hated learning. I don't blame them because the education system overall is not something that a student is going to like. They think it's useless, which is also perhaps true. But then that if that mentality is carried into the when you are joining as an industrial career, then it is a dangerous thing because then you accept the job like a desktop support software job. I said, okay, it's giving me a living wages. And then what you don't realize, not only you are going to grow in that career, but after 10 years, your career is over. I mean, you are going to be totally useless, both in the industry as well as other point of view. So you need to be very careful in software industry, especially when you're joining an IT job and a company and a particular segment. What is your future in next 5 years, 10 years? This should be your first, important criteria to go into that kind of thing. And what I'm telling today is basically it's not a matter of fiction. I already meet a lot of people who are in a desktop support software job, both in US and in India, especially that's how they started their career 10, 15 years back. And today they're in bad shape. They know their days are numbered, meaning in another 1 to 3 years, their job will be over. And now they're trying to, they come to me and say, sir, should I do a Cisco certificate or this certificate, that certificate, because we don't have any other choice now. So don't get into that. In fact, you need to get into a vertical where you should grow. And I'm coming, what are those verticals are going to be? Now, let's take a look at the industrial vertical by IT spending. So size of the circle will give you the size of IT spending. I mean, if you look at the biggest circle, obviously banking securities that we call FinTech are one of the largest. That's around 84 billion in IT spending. I'm giving you the statistics mostly in the US and in probably it's 5 years old, but it is roughly it is today even in the same way. Manufacturing and another will be giving another 63 billion. That's also big. Then transportation is around 24 billion, somewhat in the middle. Insurance at 34 billion. Retail is relatively smaller, that is like 24 billion. Healthcare provider at 15, but healthcare is an interesting thing. Healthcare is one of the fastest rising in IT sector. So this statistics is somewhat like 5 to 7 year old. Right now, I was trying to get at the new one. In fact, healthcare right now is catching up with the other sectors, and education government are relatively smaller in terms of the IT spending. So this tells you that the different size, meaning how many IT jobs you can expect, particularly in that particular vertical, and you're also looking at their growth. So obviously, financial and healthcare, transportation, usually they're the fastest growth. But when you select this kind of vertical, growth is not the only thing. You need to really look into many other aspects: so size, growth, security, stability of the job. There are many other things that you have to consider when you are trying to get into a vertical. And let me give you that perspective. Okay, so now I'm giving you the last 3 years of statistics on different vertical. As you know that in pandemic year in 2020, there was a little bit less spending, but then obviously the last year spending in every other vertical have increased. And then 2022, currently this year, I can tell you that we are definitely struggling a little bit in terms because of the inflation and other stuff. Now, it's very interesting to see that few verticals of IT has withered pandemic. They have not been affected by pandemic. So one is that data center and systems. And I'm going to show more details of that. So what is important to note here, why I'm trying to get these statistics of 2020 versus 21, is that if you find a vertical that was stable even in the pandemic years, you know that vertical was stable. Maybe that vertical did not have a growth, but at least you did not risk any kind of layoff in that kind of vertical, provided you did well. So this is why this graph is going to be important. And if you look at it, in 2020, there are a couple of verticals that has gone through a big swing. So, for example, transportation. You know that total airline industry was completely shut down. I mean, that's a big part of this transportation. So, any people, and also the traveling industry. So, basically, any people who are part of that, any IT people who are part of the industry, they suffered a massive layoff on that particular year. You look at again minus 11.6 at manufacturing. That also suffered a lot during pandemic time because they could not transport the goods. So, and then they're related. But other than these two, and then wholesale trade and these more or less, if you look at all other IT spending has been steadily positive, both in even 2020 as well as 21. Interestingly, banking remained solid. Typically, banking is called heart of the everything. So, as steady growth, education actually have seen more growth because online education was actually going faster. So that's why 2020 and 21, you'll see that education is going even more faster. Government is always stable. Healthcare has also grown very significantly over the time. So relatively, this will tell you which verticals are relatively stable and kind of a recession proof, or I would say that more stable verticals. Okay, now let's get into so the bottom line is that I mean say somebody comes you with a job where that job is linked with airlines industry versus it's linked with banking. Obviously, you will select banking. If you don't get other job, that's a different issue. But you should always ask, like when you're doing some kind of coding and stuff, like in what one that will be, which vertical that you're getting into. Now, you can. I'm going to show you something other interesting thing that which are the verticals in terms of the software stack that is going, because you can be a mobile app developer or you can be an app developer in a healthcare IT, you can be in data analytics, can be in media, can be in cloud, can be in the social media kind of engagement or the digital media platform, can be in the shared economy, can be in security. Now this is showing the growth for the next 2 years. I'm just based on certain perception of the CIOs, and you can clearly see that mobile app has the highest growth that will be observed in another next 2 years from now. Now, does that means that you will jump into a career in mobile app? So that's the question. If you look at the growth of the industry, do you go by what is the projected growth? Now that's where I'm going to show you some interesting statistics. So let's look at the salary of growth in mobile app, versus a DevOps engineer. So this is roughly the same thing that basically I'm showing mobile app on the right hand side and DevOps, which are basically skills that you require for cloud and the maintenance and stuff like that. So if you look at both the curve, and if you look at after 10 years, you can clearly see that DevOps guys, uh, at the initial career, they probably will be getting paid 50% more. Whereas after certain expertise, certain experience, they're going to be almost 2 times more in that. And I'm coming back to that, why it will be so. Now, I've shown that DevOps growth is way slower compared to mobile. In fact, you're looking at the left-hand side of the curve where the job growth will be almost one third compared to the mobile app. But if you look at the individual career growth of the salary, it's quite opposite picture. So another example I'm giving, if you look at the AI/ML, now everybody wants to learn data analytic and AI/ML, and then this is going very fast. As an industry, almost like 30% year to year, the career in data analytic, AI/ML, they're going very faster. And I'm showing it by different reason. So the point then is that should you jump into AI/ML or data analytic, as many of your friends are trying? So I'm trying to give you a decision here that how that will look like. Now, if you look at the statistics here in India, how much the machine learning engineers are getting paid, it's almost same as like a DevOps scales, and the starting salary is little better, and it looks quite good today. But here's the interesting thing that I wanted to tell you that what is going to happen. Now, let me get back to the stuff here. Uh, Here's the fundamental. Like any other business, your salary will be determined by demand supply. Now, if you ask me that why a DevOps is getting paid almost twice compared to a mobile app, what is the reason? What is the reason? Does that mean that doing DevOps are more difficult compared to developing mobile app and so? It's not the case. I mean, it's the same thing with the AIML. I mean, people think that they deserves more salary in AIML because the AIML require a lot more mathematical, statistical skills, which is actually not true. In fact, the most interesting thing, the reason that DevOps or cloud engineers are paid more, and they will be actually paid more than even AIML engineers, is because it's very difficult to be a DevOps engineer because they don't get the exposure. Think about this. If somebody has to be a cloud engineer in enterprise scale, that guy need to have a job that gives him the exposure of an enterprise cloud, where you should be able to do all kind of Kubernetes and the latest stacks, and learn about SaaS, IaaS, PaaS kind of platform, like AWS Lambda kind of skills. So what restrict the supply line of an IT training is that they need that kind of an exposure. And if you don't get an exposure, you are not getting trained on that. I mean, usually you won't get that kind of cloud training just by joining any kind of training center. Whereas in the case of mobile app and stuff, there are so many hundreds and thousands of small mobile app company all over India. You can join, you can have a mobile phone, you can develop an app. There's so many app industries. So as much as there is a high demand for mobile app, there is also a very thick supply line. So that's why the pricing in the case of mobile app will is checked up. Now, this same thing is going to be applied in the case of AIML. That's a new career, but being an AIML engineer is very easy. I mean, you just learn few libraries in R and Python, and I'm telling you, most of them are becoming AIML engineer by learning few libraries, and that's not going to last for a long because there is a huge supply line. And in fact, even for having to demand, like if you need high salaries in AIML engineering, if you go on to the top layer, you really need to know the ICE cloud, PaaS cloud, how to implement your AIML in the edge cloud. Those things, those kind of software skills are becoming very important. If you're learning only math skill in AIML, you will not get paid well because the supply line is again becoming too thick because anybody can learn these kind of libraries and can claim themselves to be an AML engineer, and people don't know beyond that. So obviously what you really need to look into for your career perspective is, I'm just trying to summarize the entire learning, is that not only you look into the size growth of that particular industry, it is important. At the same time, you also need to be careful about the supply line. Now, whatever you're doing is that supply line is becoming very thick because anybody can learn it, because anybody can get exposure to it. I don't think that fundamentally learning AIML versus mobile app versus cloud, any of them is difficult. Relatively, the difficulty level and the learning level is same, but depending on what kind of company you are selecting, what kind of exposure you are getting, that will determine your growth. So what we're trying to do in the cracking IT jobs here, I just wanted to summarize, and conclude this podcast. Of course, as I established in your first podcast, your career growth will depends on your ability to code. So we are publishing a lot of books called Pokomo. Pokomo means uncommon. So we give a lot of coding problem so that your coding skills and coding thinking and software abstract thinking can be very much sharpened. At the same time, in a cracking IT jobs, we are creating consortium of the small and mid-sized companies that offer a lot of good coding because those are very fundamentals to your career growth. And in fact, the companies that are part of our cracking IT consortium, they have their own cloud and stuff. So you'll get a very good exposure to a very high learning curve. And we are also starting a coding club next week at the beginning of June. That will we're coming out with an announcement soon, so that you can solve 10 fun problems in coding it will be extremely important, because if you really want a good job in today in Amazon, Google, or any kind of big tech, you really have to crack pretty high standard of coding exam. So overall, we are trying to create content, questions, practice material, so that you can practice a lot of coding for getting into best kind of companies. At the same time, we are bringing the companies that are offering good coding jobs, so that your career growth can be substantially higher compared to others. Thank you. So I end it here today. Next week, also, I try to come up with another important aspect of software career. That is, how do you like to grow inside a company? Because those things are going to be very important as well. So, given that, today, let me finish